Christmas canapé offers partygoers a small treat that staves off hunger and soaks up the fizz. Founder and host of Crazy Sexy Food, Hannah Harley-Young, joins me now with a toothsome selection. Lovely to see you, Hannah.
You too.
Origin of the word canapé?
Yes, French. Sort of from the, of course, from sort of the 1800s. It means sofa. So it's sort of playing on the analogy of someone sitting or lying on a sofa. It is about the garnish, traditionally sitting on a piece of stale bread or pastry. Obviously, it's evolved over the years. I don't have any stale bread for you, don't worry. But the idea is that it's something sort of garnish, something exciting sitting on a vehicle that you can put in your mouth in 1 or 2 bites.
It's obviously post-war. What is it? Is it 60s or 70s? How long have we been eating these things?
I would say around about then. And I think what's interesting, I mean, I always look towards even the 80s, a little bit sort of... later on, where it's where you sort of have that sort of the classic vol au vent, which was, you know, a little bit dry, a little bit tasteless, and I think that's why I've brought a real selection for you to show you how far we've come. Another traditional one, obviously, being your pigs in blankets. I'm going to hold off for a second before I choke. Another thing that I have to say about canapés, there are a few little tips that I must give people super quickly. Make sure they're small. 1 or 2 bites. When you're at a party, you're standing, you've got a glass in one hand, then you need to hold it. There. OK, I would have preferred a glass of wine, but, you know, I can't stand these canapés where I have to put the glass down in order to eat the food. I want to do it all at once.
I couldn't agree more. You should never eat more than you can lift.
Exactly.
GBNews, the People's Channel.
Good evening. You're watching State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. On tonight's show, a record 1,500 illegal migrants crossed the Channel over the Christmas period. That's the busiest festive period since 2018, since records began. Now, nearly 36,000 illegal migrants have crossed this year at a staggering cost to the British taxpayer of £5.4 billion a year. Lives are being lost and the British public is utterly frustrated and fed up. Labour's plan is failing and the taxpayer, that means you, well, we're all footing the bill. Labour, meanwhile, is reportedly drawing up brand new plans to diversify the curriculum taught in Britain's schools and to breathe new life into our outdated system. And Elon Musk says that Keir Starmer's Britain is not good for investment, and a record number of young people at the same time are now leaving Britain to look for work elsewhere. Is Britain in the midst of a catastrophic brain drain? That's a question we'll be debating tonight. And concerns have been raised that up to 100 radical extremists could be allowed back into Britain if Shamima Begum gets her citizenship back. Are we about to open the floodgates to more danger on Britain's streets? State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. I'll also be joined tonight by my panel, former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle and political commentator Alex Armstrong. As ever, let me know your views, gbnews.com/your say. But right now, it's time for the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you and good evening. The top stories this hour. 3 Afghan nationals who were convicted in Belgium over their involvement in a major people smuggling ring have been arrested whilst on the run in the UK. Prosecutors in Belgium say they were part of a gang involved in organising the transport of migrants from Afghanistan through Iran and the Balkans into Western Europe. Authorities say they were also part of a group who committed serious sexual offences, including rape against male migrant minors. The gang members now face being returned to Belgium to serve their sentences. A fourth body has been recovered from the English Channel near Calais after 3 migrants died when they fell from a small boat yesterday. French media reports say the body of the fourth man was found near the beach at Sangatte this morning, a few hundred metres away from yesterday's incident. The other 3 migrants died when they fell into the water as their small boat was setting off for Britain early in the morning. Dozens of others were rescued after they fell from overcrowded vessels. So far this year, 77 migrants have died trying to cross the Channel. In other news, the National Day of Mourning and State Funeral is due to be held on the 9th of January for former US President Jimmy Carter, who died at the age of 100. King Charles paid tribute earlier today, saying he was a committed public servant and devoted his life to promoting peace and human rights. Joe Biden praised him as a man of principle, faith and humility, whilst Donald Trump said Americans owe him a debt of gratitude. The UK flags above Westminster and number 10 have been flying at half-mast in respect. Elsewhere, 5 people have been charged in connection with the death of One Direction star Liam Payne at a hotel in Argentina, according to local media. The 31-year-old star died in October after falling from the 3rd-floor balcony of a hotel in Buenos Aires. The hotel manager and a hotel employee, as well as Roger Nores, who was reportedly a friend of Liam, have been charged with manslaughter. Argentina's National Criminal and Correctional Prosecutor's Office is quoted as saying. Brian Paez and Ezekiel Pereira, who both reportedly worked at the hotel, have been charged with supplying drugs. And Edinburgh's Hogmanay celebrations are cancelled due to high winds and extreme weather, organisers announced hours ahead of celebrations kicking off today. Weather warnings are also in place for snow, wind and rain across much of the UK on New Year's Day. Yellow warnings are in place for Northern Ireland, Northern England and parts of Scotland from tomorrow, before extending across most of the UK on Wednesday. A series of warnings are also in force and will stay and remain in force until 6 a.m. on January the 2nd. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, this is the #1 issue in the country right now. 1,500 illegal migrants have crossed into the UK in small boats between December 25th and December 28th. This marks the busiest Christmas period since records began back in 2018. Nearly 36,000 illegal migrants have now arrived in the country illegally on small boats this year alone, which takes the overall total since 2018 to more than 150,000 illegal migrants entering the country. Now, Labour's strategy is clearly ineffective. It's not working. It's riddled with flaws. We have no active deterrent in place. The Rwanda plan has been completely scrapped. Policies that have been introduced under the Labour government have inadvertently made it easier to stay in this country. About 2/3 of the people who have been applying for asylum have seen their claims approved. That, I think, sends a dangerous message to many other would-be illegal migrants. Make the journey to Britain, it's worth the risk. Not to mention the fact that we are also welcoming those people with open arms, giving them cash cards, smartphones, access to the NHS, access to schools, and much more besides. Now, the human cost of all this is becoming overwhelming. At least 77 illegal migrants have now died or gone missing in the Channel this year, the deadliest year on record. We have to solve this crisis. The economic cost, meanwhile, for British taxpayers is ballooning. It's costing an estimated £5.4 billion every year. This system is costing us £18 billion on the current cohort of illegal migrants. Now, to put that in perspective, we've just taken winter fuel payments off British pensioners to save £1.5 billion. But we're spending £5.5 billion every year on this crisis. And we're smashing family farms up and down this country to save £500 million. But again, we've been spending about £18 billion on this illegal migration crisis. We've got to get to the bottom of it. Here's my view. A country that cannot protect its borders is not a serious country. And a nation that prioritises external crises, that puts external courts over our own laws, our own people, is failing its own people. I think the British taxpayers deserve so much more than this. I think the British public are utterly fed up. and I think they deserve to be treated with respect. According to a new YouGov poll, the vast majority of people in this country are utterly dissatisfied with how this issue is being managed. More than two-thirds, 69%, think that immigration in Britain is now being handled badly. In many polls, it's the number one issue facing the country today, as far as voters are concerned. Labour clearly must change its approach. The current plan is not working. It's a disaster, and it's getting worse, not better. So I think the government needs to really have a clear, effective strategy. It needs to change course. It needs to deal with these migrant crossings. It needs to deal with the soaring costs that, let's be honest, it's the British taxpayer who's paying them more than anybody else. And it needs to really deal with this exasperation out there in the country with a system that's not working and treating people with respect. We have to get control of our borders. We have to do whatever is necessary to regain control, whether that includes leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, whether it includes reforming or repealing the Human Rights Act, whether it means having an active deterrent like the Rwanda plan that puts British laws and British courts first. As ever, let me know your views via gbnews.com/yoursay. Tweet me at GoodwinMJ. But I'm joined right now by my panel, former Labour MP Lloyd Russell Moyle and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Lloyd, this issue is really causing a big headache for the Labour government, and Labour's failing. Wouldn't you agree?
I think most of your monologue was factually incorrect.
Which bits?
Well, to start with, the idea that Labour's policies have made things worse.
The worst Christmas on record.
No, this is... records only started a few years ago. So, yes, a few years ago in the last government. If you look at records that go back further, which don't pick out the boat crossings, but look at illegal migration, we see this is a common pattern. Labour gets in and illegal migration has ballooned. It happened in the 90s as well, and it takes about 4 years to get it back under control. The boat crossings are reduced from about 20% down from 2022. They're slightly up over last year, but they're not up as much as 2022. And what we see is returns are much increased. In fact, returns are increased far more than the increase of the number of people coming over. So the net number of people staying in this country now is less than any time in the last 5 years. And that 150,000 figure that you said is not net. So actually, we've sent a lot of those people back as well. So this is the problem with your figures: manipulation and scaremongering.
I'm just going to stop you there. There is no manipulation. What Labour have done, let's be clear, the returns, you've returned around 9,000 or so people.
Which is more, 20% up than the Conservatives.
What the Labour government has also done, and I'm going to come to Alex on this in a second, is you've approved two-thirds of the applications for asylum. So you've allowed about 50 or 60,000 people to remain in the country.
That has always happened. That happened under the Conservatives, that happened under the last Labour. Now, what you're suggesting this is some new policy. That's not true. The standing policy has always been about two-thirds. Sometimes it's been higher. Sometimes it's been almost 70% of people who have been approved, because they are genuine asylum seekers. Now, what I believe should happen, and I hope that you would agree, is that we should set up a processing centre in France, in our embassy in Paris or in Calais, wherever, and we should say very kindly to anyone that crosses, we've collected you, don't worry, we'll take you to our processing centre immediately, return them back to a processing centre in France where they can be fairly processed, and some people who are genuine should be able to come over, and others should not be able to.
Just hold the thought there, Lloyd. Alex, there's a lot of gaslighting going on in the national debate at the moment. Of course, what Lloyd didn't mention is that Labour softened the Illegal Migration Act, so they meant that actually what was the previous ruling, which is if you arrive in Britain illegally, you cannot stay in the country. Labour's actually quietly got rid of that. They're not really being honest with voters.
It wasn't happening, though, was it?
Alex, how do we fix this crisis?
Well, look, I mean, to go back to Labour policy, because one of the original questions you asked, Lloyd, was, has Labour's policies actually contributed to these increase in crossings? And the answer is yes. There is no deterrent, is there? We have nothing to stop people wanting to cross the Channel. In fact, there's incentive. We're giving them hotels, bed and breakfast, lunch, dinner, a warm room, more than our pensioners are getting, I believe. And so there's nothing stopping them. I mean, of course, we've frozen Syrian applications, but we saw today that this boat crossing that became deadly was as a result of 50 Syrian men storming the boat. So that's not stopping them either. One of the things that you did say that I liked, though, Lloyd, was that we should send them back to France. And we absolutely should be. That's the last point of return where they originated from, and we should be sending them back there for processing and whatever else. Nobody should be allowed into this country when our own people have to suffer. This is Labour's choice. They are choosing to smash the gangs. Well, did we only have one press conference about one man that was so-called smashed, and they continued on anyway? So obviously smashing the gangs isn't working. 007 is not flying off to North Africa to go and smash these gangs, despite what Keir Starmer thinks Yvette Cooper's got going on with MI5. And unfortunately, the whole policy is a failure.
Lloyd, can I just press you on the numbers here? Because, you know, we are in one of the most severe cost of living crises that we've had since the Second World War. The numbers are staggering. 5.4 billion a year on our broken asylum system, an estimated 18 billion or thereabouts since 2018. How do you, as a Labour politician, reconcile those figures with this cost of living crisis? Because let's be frank, the numbers aren't coming down. They're unlikely to come down.
Well, they're 2 billion down from the peak under the Conservative government.
How do you reconcile the amount that we're spending? British taxpayers are paying on a crisis that the Labour government is not responding. How do you reconcile that?
This straw man argument you keep putting up. The numbers.
These are real figures. I mean, the people watching this show are paying £5.4 billion a year.
The numbers are shocking, and they were paying almost £8 billion a year under the Conservatives. And so immediately we need to start getting that down. We need to scrap some of the silly hotel arrangements. We need to scrap some of the silly barge arrangements, scrap some of those silly things. We need to return people quickly, and upping the return rates means that you're not having to warehouse people in hotels. You have to start making sure that you process those applications quickly so that they can then work, and they have to work, therefore, and pay their own way if they are legitimately here. All those things need to happen, and that's what Labour's doing. No one expects it to go from 8 billion to 0 in 6 months. You expect it to go from about 8 billion to 5 billion, and then to 4 billion, and then to... And that's what Labour's plan is. So stop pretending that this is some Labour crisis. This is a crisis that the country kicked out one of the worst governments that we've had in history on immigration.
I think we can all agree with that.
We all agree with that, yeah.
Government on the illegal migration
it takes a long time to turn the ship around. My view is that deterrents don't work. That's why they didn't work under the Conservatives as well.
Well, they did actually, Lloyd. Well, they did.
They didn't.
Well, no, come on. We have to be honest about that. We saw migrants fleeing Northern Ireland to avoid the Rwanda crisis. Even if it stops 10 people, we have to say it's done something. That's 10 people that might have lost their lives.
10 people then is still 5.
It's not deterrence when we know there were people queuing up in Calais
if you want to
wait for Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister.
If you want to reduce the billions down to sensible figures that we all want to do, the hundreds of thousands. I mean, under the last Labour government, the number of people that were claiming asylum got down to about 10,000 a year. I think that's the kind of number that this country can expect to look after the people who are genuinely fleeing this country.
But
that's the number that we target.
Illegally, I assume you would not endorse people arriving illegally in small boats breaking our laws.
In fact, previously, more people arrived illegally. And
you're okay with that?
The number of people that arrive illegally now is actually at a historic low. It's just that they arrive illegally in a very dangerous way via the boats rather than in hiding in planes or hiding in trucks. I don't think any way to come... we need a proper way to come here. We need a proper processing centre in France. That's what I believe. That's where we need to move to.
Some might call it a Brexit benefit that we stopped the lorry.
Well, it happened actually under the EU. We stopped it because of joint working. I don't think we should pretend that the number of illegal people who are coming illegally, is your words, not mine, is up, because they're not.
Thank you, Lloyd and Alex. The debate's going to go on. The numbers are going up. After the break, Labour, meanwhile, wants to diversify the curriculum to appreciate the diversity of Britain. Are they actually risking our children's future for wokeness, or is this a sensible, credible plan for reforming the education system? Let's talk about it with an expert right after this break. See you soon.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Locals in Abingdon in Oxfordshire have signed a petition to keep the name of their local pub, and it's called The Midget. Now, this comes after a university lecturer led an 11-month campaign to change the name of the pub, and the owners, Green King, have caved in. But locals are fighting back, and GB News spoke to one resident, Leanne Thompson, for her thoughts earlier today.
I'm not feeling great about it, to be honest. You know, it's a pub that's been here for a very long time. It's called The Midget after a MG car, and they're changing it to the Roaring Raindrop, which a lot of people are not happy about. We know why they're changing it, but A lady apparently came in who was very upset at the offensive term for the name midget, but nobody here sees it as an offensive term. You don't see the midget and feel any kind of offence towards that. It's named after a car. If she was to actually come, she might actually know more about it, but apparently she's not even been into the pub. She's just heard about it and broadcasted on social media that she wanted the name changed because it's offensive, which as locals don't feel that way. It's the midget. It will always be the midget. And if you look, it's even still on Midget Close. So I don't know if they're going to change it to the Roaring Raindrop Close.
Do you know, you should walk into the midget now and go, do you serve shorts? And just keep going on the joke. It's named after a car, the MG Midget, that was manufactured in the town of Abingdon for a while. The car was released in 1961. The Boozer was built in 1974, giving huge pride to the area. It wasn't named after midgets, you know, the Snow White and the 7 vertically challenged individuals variety. It's named after a car.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we've been discussing the illegal migration crisis, and some of you have been sending in your views. I just want to read a few. Kevin says, Labour are smashing the records, not the gangs. Another GB News viewer says, how can Lloyd say the Rwanda deterrent wasn't working when it was never properly enacted? Jane, thank you very much, says, what a pleasure to see Matt on his own show. I will be giving you the cash later on, Jane. Thanks for that. Brian also says, welcome to GB News, talks a lot of common sense. Maureen says, welcome, great to see you as a presenter. Thank you so much, everybody. It's great to be with you in this community of ours. Now, Labour is reportedly drawing up brand new plans to refresh the curriculum taught in Britain's schools with a pledge to breathe new life into our outdated education system. The Education Secretary's vision aims to create a curriculum that reflects, in Labour's words, the diversities of our society and help produce young people who appreciate the diversity of Britain. And it's now been revealed that alongside all of that, prestigious institutions are now following the same trend, with the Royal Society of Biology suggesting this week that we should pursue a no more heroes approach to a committee that was led by feminist Professor Becky Francis, an expert in gender equality, an expert in lots of woke issues, who in the past has criticised Tony Blair and New Labour for being too driven by academic achievement. Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice has responded to Labour's plans today in the Telegraph newspaper, saying that he thinks the plans are a ludicrous proposal from the wokerati. Is Labour gambling our children's future for the sake of wokeness? Now, I'm joined by somebody who knows a lot about this subject, Professor of History at the University of Exeter and author of Why the Industrial Revolution Happened in Britain, Jeremy Black. Welcome to the show, Jeremy. I'm a big fan of your many, many books. No idea how you publish so many books, but welcome to the show. Just give our viewers a sense as to what is driving this, because a lot of people will see these plans and they'll think, well, here we are again, another attempt to politicise the education system, to sort of impose a narrow set of beliefs on our children, to get them to see the world in a particular way. What's driving all of this stuff? What's behind it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and I think your viewers are correct. This is an ideological programme. There's no educational value to it. The national curriculum was last changed in the early 2010s. I, in fact, was on the committee for history and that. And there's no particular reason to change it again. Obviously, it takes an enormous amount of time and expense to do so. And in a sense, what one's got is a group of people who are, shall we say, they're out of love with their country. I think that's a fair remark one could make. And they use the argument about diversity. And of course, what they mean is particular types of diversity. They use the argument about diversity in order to try and impose matters. And clearly, if you were a teacher who was to say, no, I really don't think this is appropriate, or it's not appropriate for my students or my pupils, you'd probably get into disciplinary trouble, and in a way it increases the government's control over education, which is not a good thing. It's not healthy.
I mean, Jeremy, let me just come in on this as a former university professor myself. I was told many times that I had to decolonise my university reading list, that actually this process of decolonisation was seen as being central to the education system, which worryingly we're now seeing, it appears, roll out to primary and secondary schools. Just tell our viewers, if you could, what is meant by this decolonisation agenda? What's actually behind it? What's it trying to achieve?
Well, what you've got is you've got, in a sense, the Cold War continuing into the present day. So you've got a very left-wing critique of our society, our continuity through history, and an argument that, in a way, it was in some respects an imperial or colonial project, and that, in a sense, unless you change that or reject that, you're a bad person. So what it's trying to do is not just as it were, push a certain set of beliefs. It's also trying to argue that any attempt to query or question these beliefs, what you're doing now, what I'm doing, is essentially turns us into some form of public criminal.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm also looking at these plans alongside a few other things that we've seen Bridget Phillipson, the Labour Education Secretary, announce in recent months. As you know, Labour's also essentially got rid of a piece of work that was undertaken by esteemed professors to try and ensure that we have balance in how we think about British history and heritage. That's been scrapped. A proposed Higher Education Free Speech Act has been paused and may well actually be scrapped too. And my question, Jeremy, is all of this, if you take it together, is all of this actually telling us something about Labour's philosophical approach towards the education system? Because it seems to me that this government is instinctively suspicious of free speech, of free expression. It's got a very politicised view of our history, of our heritage, which is, I would argue, inherently negative. Or am I barking up the wrong tree? Does all of this add up to actually a fairly coherent philosophical position?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Matt. I mean, the philosophy behind New Labour, in the sense of the Starmer New Labour, is one which is essentially anti-democratic, because what they're arguing is that there is a correct answer, and what a surprise, it's their answer, when the whole purpose of a lot of education is encouraging people to analyse problems and to accept that there may well be different approaches and that some approaches are better than others, but that doesn't mean that there's just simply one monopoly of value. And I was very struck yesterday. I was at actually a very pleasant ham end of Christmas party, and I was listening to, this was in the next door constituency, and I was listening to a avid Labour supporter denouncing the Greens in central Devon because by not voting Labour, they'd apparently allowed evil to triumph, evil being in the unlikely person of Mr. Stride. I've got no particular brief for or against Mel Stride, but the idea that, as it were, that you should regard people who are your opponents as in some way evil is a deeply troubling one. And it takes us back to the sort of language of Angela Rayner about Tory scum. It takes us back to the argument of, I can't remember which Labour politician, that they would never kiss a Tory, etc., etc. And this is actually rather disturbing in not just a democratic political system, but in a democratic society. I mean, how do they propose to make House of Commons committees work if they regard the people on the other side as in some way evil. And I think this is a way in which our society is going that is really quite disturbing. I mean, as I understand it, I've read the reports, the same ones you've read. As I understand it, they intend to impose this on all schools, on the academies as well.
Yeah.
And in a sense, in part, it's an attempt to bring back the old system of LEAs, from what I can see, under some sort of central government diktat, which in this case means very clearly a Labour Party imposition. And one of the interesting points is that under Michael Gove, the Conservatives managed to raise educational standards in England, whereas in Scotland under the SNP and in Wales under Labour, there was no comparable rise. So yes, you've said it in one at the beginning. We ought to put the educational needs of our children first, and also the health of our democracy, and put those before a kind of rather Stalinist ideology.
Well, thank you, Jeremy Black, for joining us. I'm a big fan of your work, and I urge viewers to go and check it out. I think it was Thomas Sowell, the Conservative economist, who once said that the obsession with diversity is so fascinating because at the same time you can never really see a conservative sociologist or a conservative political scientist in the universities. So these are institutions that talk endlessly about diversity while having remarkably little political diversity. But thank you for joining us. Now, in a moment, Elon Musk has said that Keir Starmer's Britain is not good for investment, and a record number of young people at the same time right here in Britain are moving abroad to look for work and to start a new life. Is Britain in the midst of a catastrophic brain drain? That's a question we're going to be discussing and debating next with one of those young people. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the New Year's period, it's likely to be unsettled, outbreaks of rain and some strong winds too, with multiple Met Office warnings already in force, so do keep an eye on those if you're travelling around for any festivities. But otherwise, this evening we've got a warm front moving into cold air, so not only bringing outbreaks of rain, but also some snow across parts of Scotland, mainly across hills, but we could also see some flurries to lower levels too. And these outbreaks of rain slowly edging their way into parts of Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders. It's going to be quite heavy and persistent at times, so a very wet morning to start New Year's Eve. Elsewhere, it's going to be largely dry, plenty of cloud around there and perhaps some drizzly spots across hilly areas. And for New Year's Eve itself, likely to be a very unsettled day, particularly across Scotland, where we are expecting those heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain, some quite blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts too, and also snow, particularly across the north of Scotland and Shetland Island as well. And also a very wet start across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Once again, heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain at times, but elsewhere largely dry, though it is going to be a rather windy day on offer, particularly in northern areas under all that cloud and rain as it slowly edges its way towards the southeast, eventually clearing parts of Scotland, allowing some brighter spells to develop, but still very windy here and still plenty of blustery showers on offer by the afternoon. Once again, there's a chance these could be falling as snow at times too. Now, by the afternoon, outbreaks of rain generally across northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England, the driest of the weather likely across the far south and southeast. And then for New Year's Day itself, once again very unsettled. Further outbreaks of rain, this slowly once again edging its way towards central and southern parts of the UK. Largely dry to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers moving through, once again falling as snow at times, and it is going to be feeling cold and remaining cold for the end of the week also. Bye for now.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we were just discussing Labour's plans to diversify the national curriculum, and some of you have written in. Christian says, this is absolutely an ideological programme, brainwashing our children to see the world through the eyes of the left, who despise their own people and their own culture. Peter says, how long before schools are not allowed to teach about the Second World War in case it offends Germans? And Elsa says, Matt, these plans for education are simply indoctrination, anti-British. Too much time is spent on left-leaning brainwashing of students. And I think, in a way, this is linked to the next story I want to talk about, which is Tesla boss Elon Musk, one of the world's, well, he is the world's richest man, has just hit out at Keir Starmer and the Labour government, again, saying that the current government is leading wealth creators and entrepreneurs to leave the country, and they are no longer willing to invest in UK PLC. His comments come as Scottish lawmakers want him to open a new gigafactory in the country, but Mr Musk has hit back, saying very few companies will be willing to invest in the UK with the current Labour administration, a claim which Downing Street have since rejected. Now, the lack of investment in Britain comes as it's also been revealed today that young Britons are travelling to work in other countries, like Australia, in record numbers, 50,000 last year, and the number who have gone elsewhere to places like Dubai has more than doubled in recent years. So as young people are leaving, businesses are deterring their investment, they're a bit gloomy on the future of Britain's economy, are we now suffering one of the biggest brain drains in our history? Now, I'm joined to discuss this by parliamentary researcher and political commentator Jake Thrupp, who is himself Australian.
Yes, I am.
And who
I'm
is
the token Aussie.
a member of Gen Z, I would imagine.
Yes.
A Zoomer. So
yes.
Just talk to me like I have no interaction with Gen Z. Why are these young people leaving Britain and heading down under?
Well, I was thinking about this today, and there's been a big change since Labor have come to government, and that is you're a young person or a young couple, and you watch Keir Starmer's first major speech as Prime Minister, where he says, quote, things will only get worse before they get better. Britain is a, quote, deeply unhealthy society. And you think to yourself, well, why would I stay to live here? Why would I invest here if I was a business person? Why would I contribute to this country? And basically that's the sort of defeatism, I think, which people just go, well, I may as well flee. I may as well flee. In terms of Australia, there was that report today that, many Britons are flocking to Australia, and I thought about this again. Well, for starters, salaries over here are quite low, vis-a-vis what you would earn in Australia, unless you're a train driver, of course. I mean, they're the best paid.
Although
on the
my
European...
trains never seem to run on time.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, train reliability is at its lowest as well. 370,000 train services partly or fully cancelled. I mean, there's no bang for your buck anymore. So you've got the salary point where nurses, I think, go to Australia and earn something like 2 to 3 times more.
Right.
So, that's the thing. The second part would be, well, the cost pressures here. There are high cost pressures here, and sure, like across the Western world, inflation is a driver of that. We get all that. But the point is, government over here has an inability to rein in government spending. And then not only that, you have Ed Miliband and all these people going on about this net zero drive. They are like a bulldozer just crashing through with this at all costs net zero agenda, which what does that do? That raises electricity bills. A report the other day that next year grocery prices will be up. So again, as a young person, you think, well, God, I can't afford to live here.
Before you get to even, the housing crisis, which again, I don't know about you, but I look at the political class in Westminster trying to talk about the housing crisis, and they seem incapable at even discussing what's causing it and what's driving this excessive demand for housing. I think we're talking in London, on average, about 21, 22 people are looking for a one-bedroom apartment in London. The cost of rent has spiralled again this year. House prices are up. I mean, if you are in Gen Z and you're thinking, where do I want to put down roots? You've got commentators as well saying, maybe it's time to consider elsewhere, Dubai or digital nomad visas in Portugal, Spain.
Yeah,
and I know Australia has actually loosened the working visa requirements to try and get young people to move over. So I can see the logic. What can Britain do now? Let's not be doom and gloom. Let's be proactive. What can Britain be doing now in the next few years, the next decade, to actually make this country more appealing to young members of Gen Z?
Well, the thing is, I mean, in the past week I've had it off, so I've been reading Boris Johnson's book, Unleashed. And look, I'm a bit biased here. I'm a huge Boris fan. And why is that? Well, because he has this optimism about, the UK, about the potential of even the City of London when he was mayor. And you sort of read this stuff and you go, well, this is a time when the British public need hope, they need optimism, they need lower taxes. You need to make it an attractive business environment for people like Elon Musk to come to the UK. I mean, fancy Reeves and Starmer having this UK investment summit and not inviting the world's richest person. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, let me just push back on you a little bit there around Boris Johnson, because he's come under some heat online recently, hasn't he? The so-called discussion around the Boris wave. That actually it was Boris Johnson who opened the floodgates to
that is true.
Uncontrolled, low-wage, low-skill migration. And, of course, during the Brexit referendum, we had that debate about let's have an Australian-based point system for immigration, which now, interestingly, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are now also saying, well, hey, let's have lots of high-skill migration. Of course, what we ended up with here in Britain was the very opposite of that. Actually, Boris Johnson opened the doors to masses of low-wage, low-skill migration, which brings me back to Gen Z, because there's also a meme that's been going viral recently, the sort of Nick, 30 years old, and the social contract that is facing young people in Britain today, which is they work hard, they play by the rules, they get a graduate job in London, but look at what they're paying in terms of train tickets, look at who they're subsidising in the welfare system, in social housing, and also they're having to deal with, violence is up in London, criminality is being mainstream, shoplifting and so on. And a lot of Zoomers are saying, this social contract that we have in Britain, it's not working for our generation.
Yeah. I mean, even healthcare. I mean, the NHS, right? I mean, it's crumbling. It's crumbling. And in Australia, if you wanted a GP appointment, you could get one that day or the next day. Over here, I don't think it's quite the same. I worked for a Welsh MP prior to the election, and the number one issue on the doorstep was, hey, we can't get a dental appointment. It takes 18 months to get a dental appointment in mid-Wales there because there's only 2 NHS dentists. So you're right about that. I mean, people go, well, this is not working. The trains aren't working, so workers can't commute to and from work. We can't get a GP appointment when we want one. Salaries are low. You think, why am I bothering? Taxes are high.
But, the one thing I always said to my Gen Z students is, don't sit it out. If you want to make a change, you've got to vote, you've got to be involved politically, you've got to have your voice heard. Thank you, Jake, for having us on. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Now, look, with 2025 just around the corner, a couple of days, in fact, today at GB News, we are saying a big thank you, and we are sending our viewers a very special message.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Now, in a moment, concerns have been raised that up to 100 Islamist extremists could be allowed back into Britain if Shamima Begum gets her citizenship back. Are we about to open the floodgates to danger? I want to discuss that question head on. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations right now.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. Conditions slowly improving across the far east of the Mediterranean, but the risk of showers across southern parts of Spain over the next 24 hours. Low pressure starting to pull away, but still the risk of some heavy showers for Cyprus, but generally dry across Greece, across into Italy. Sunny spells here, temperatures around average for the time of year, but the risk of some showers across southern Spain, and generally dry as well towards Tenerife there, reaching at 20 Celsius. Generally dry for the next few days, best of the sunshine towards eastern parts. See you.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Our next guest has a rather unique career story. She was working at a pub aged 18 and Holly Farmer was spotted by a modelling scout and it turned out to be her lucky day.
Scott Yos Clark sent this message to Holly.
Holly, 18, 5'10", she does not belong in a pub. And I absolutely love that, Holly, because it's a bit like Dirty Dancing, where it's like, you can't put baby in the corner. Holly does not belong in a pub. You belong on the catwalk. What was that moment like for you when you were scouted by Yoz?
It was crazy. I have to say I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Like, I was just on my lunch break. I was working at a pub, so... yeah, I was on my lunch break walking, going to Primark and...
You're going to Primark?
Got stopped by yours.
How did that interaction go?
Well, first question was, how tall are you? So, 5'10".
Very much that.
Yeah, then he gave me his card and asked, like, explained everything, that he's a model scout, obviously.
Yeah, because generally when I scout, especially when I get close to that person, I tend to look in their eyes, and when you see something there, it's like everything works on the face and then the eyes gives you away.
Well, you've spotted a gem in Holly. I mean, you can tell even when you walked in, you are built to be a model.
I did my first fashion week here in London and then went to Paris and it was really fun. Wow. Now it's my full-time job. It's a bit crazy, to be honest.
Wow.
To be able to say that modelling is my full-time job now. Some brands will ask you to be a bit more serious and then others not
So it depends on the client's request as well. Ellie, give us your best model face. Ready? 3. I wonder if we can come back. 3, 2, 1. Very nice.
High fashion. Yeah. But you guys do all, like, contorted moves, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, all this high fashion. Do yours?
I'm just permanently living in model
You actually
model
are,
world.
though. He actually
this
does.
is it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we were just discussing the brain drain here in Britain, and a few of you have written in to share your thoughts. A GB News viewer says Elon Musk knows exactly what he's talking about. Who is going to invest in a nation where they tax the life out of everything? And Cassandra says young entrepreneurial British citizens are leaving to be replaced by low-skill and illegal migrants who are here on benefits. So thank you for your views. Keep them coming in. Now, just a reminder, you can join GB News for the ultimate countdown to 2025. Bev, Patrick, Ben, Emily and Darren will all be together for a very special show, GB News New Year's Eve, live right here from 10 p.m. tomorrow night. Don't miss it. I will be tuning in, maybe with a glass of fizz, let's see. Now, it's been claimed today that around 100 extremists could be allowed back into Britain if Shamima Begum is permitted to return from Syria, the prospects of which are said to have been bolstered by the fall of the Assad regime. The warning comes days after the senior national coordinator for counter-terrorism policing, Vicky Evans, warned that the political situation in Syria may create a space for extremism and acts of terror right here in the UK. And although the Metropolitan Police say there is no evidence yet that IS extremists are wanting to return to Britain's streets, they are very much aware of the risk. So are we gambling on a serious risk coming here to Britain and our national security in the next few weeks and months? Now, I'm joined by my panel again, former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle and political commentator Alex Armstrong. Alex, how should concerned should we be about this threat from Syria? I mean, if Shamima Begum is allowed back in, is this essentially opening the floodgates to some of those kind of former British nationals, some of whom are still actually British nationals, coming back in and bringing that hate-filled ideology with them?
Yes, well, it sets a precedent, doesn't it? That's the reality. It would set a legal precedent for those other people to come back in, and it would be one of the worst decisions taken by this government yet. I mean, there's been plenty of them. It's extremely worrying. I mean, we've seen, obviously, this new regime starting to take form in Syria, which is an Islamic extremist regime. They have roots in al-Qaeda, despite saying that they're no longer affiliated. Well, that would make sense because al-Qaeda has been obliterated. But I think, you know, these people have said that they're fleeing Syria. Lots of people coming to this country, they're fleeing Assad regime. That's fallen now. They're going to be putting in an Islamic regime, more than likely. So surely people like Shamima Begum, who have fought for this, would be more comfortable staying there. If they're coming to the UK, or any of them do come back to the UK, well, we'll know they'll be up to no good, surely.
So, Lloyd, I mean, this is all going to happen under a Labour government, former Labour MP. I mean, should these people even be allowed back into Britain?
Well, we need to do something with these people. I'm probably one of 3 MPs who have visited them numerous times in the camps. I've visited northeast Syria, controlled by the Kurds. I'm allies to the Kurds 6 times over the last 8 years. And they are dangerous people. And I've spoken to, sat down and spoken to Jihadi Jack, I've spoken to numerous others of them who have had their citizenships taken away. I've not sat down with Shamima Begum herself. And my view is that with the fall of Assad and the danger, actually, of HTS now there, that they may be released. And my bigger fear is that they will be released and able to roam around the world, running recruiting centres and camps for people who are disaffected and hate the West to come and then try and kill us. So I actually think that it's not a case of whether we let them back in and roam around. It's we need a process, whether that is an international prison to put them in, or whether it's a prison in Britain, but it needs to be a high-security terrorist prison where we do not allow these people to roam around the world. So I don't think it should be framed in a, are we letting these people back? It should be framed of these camps. I mean, just in the last week, there have been 8 Daesh ISIS attacks on these camps to try and free these prisoners from these camps that the Kurds are currently holding. It is ongoing, and as the Kurds' control will weaken because of HTS, and they will have to come to an agreement with HTS, and part of that will be about weakening controls of those camps, then we need to act very quickly to remove those that we can control and then make sure that they suffer a punishment for the awful things that they did.
Alex, if I just come in, I mean, the reality, though, too, is through our weak, if not broken, asylum system, we have historically let people in who have gone on to commit massive acts of terrorism. I think about the Manchester Evening News arena bombing that was obviously perpetrated by people who had used the asylum system to enter Britain and had then been moving between Libya and the UK. I mean, for many people watching this show, this is going to be yet another example of how the safety and security of British people appears to be at risk, while the state appears to be not doing anywhere near enough to keep them safe.
Yeah, quite, Matt. It's quite shocking stuff, and we've only just seen what's happened in Germany as a result of asylum seekers coming into the country who obviously don't like what Germany stands for. Our borders are porous. There are people, as we've seen today, hundreds of people coming into the country. We don't know who they are. So I think what Lloyd's saying, that these people could be released into the world, well, what's stopping them getting a boat from Calais?
We do know who they are. They're mainly under the age of 40, and they're mainly men.
Mainly men.
Often come from Islamic countries.
Correct. But we don't know who those exact people are when they come over on the boat. It's kind of what I'm saying here, is that those terrorists...
Well, the biggest foreign contingent group are actually former Kazakhs, former Stans, and then China.
And quite a lot from Vietnam as well. But there's also, there are a lot coming from Afghanistan and Syria and elsewhere. So
they're not the biggest. Afghanistan is not the biggest contingent in the ISIS camps. There are some, but they're not much bigger than some of the Western European countries' numbers.
But we have large...
You said they were from Islamic countries. It's not quite true in terms of the numbers, if you look at those numbers in the camps.
We have large numbers of people entering Britain. We don't know who they are. Yep. We don't really know where they're from because they destroy their passports, but we do know they're men under the age of 40.
And that's exactly why we need to get the asylum system sorted.
And also, it's part of a bigger debate, though, isn't it? It's not just about the 100 extremists that might come to Britain. It's also the fact that this appears to be happening at the time that we have this mass migration explosion in the country. We've got record levels of legal migration. We've got an illegal migration crisis that isn't working. And then we've got this glaring lack of integration in Britain that many people in the country up and down England will see, you know, communities that aren't properly integrating. It just seems as though the government isn't thinking about the bigger picture here. Where is this Labour government taking us over the next 10 years?
Integration, that's a really good point. And your earlier article, where we didn't really comment on it, was about the national curriculum. 80% of our secondary schools don't have to follow the national curriculum. I think getting integration back up would be ensuring that all of our secondary schools have to follow a national curriculum so that everyone buys into a similar idea of history, a similar idea of British values. And so that's why I think the Labour change is positive, because it is about saying we do recognise something gone very wrong with integration.
Listen, what
and we need a basis for everyone to be integrated into this country. I think that's positive.
That's a very, very dangerous route of thought.
What do you mean it's very dangerous?
Because
the argument is there's no integration.
Hang on. No, but their argument is that young people must appreciate, read the words, must appreciate diversity. What if they don't want to appreciate diversity? You know, you're telling them how to think. We mustn't tell young people how to think in the education system. We must present them with facts.
I'm sorry.
And
we must tell them that murder is wrong. We must tell them. We must tell them all those things.
No, sorry, guys. The debate is going to carry on. Thank you for your views. I think ultimately it's going to be the British people who end up having to suffer any of the consequences that may or may not happen. Thank you to the panel. Now, up next is Patrick Christys. Patrick, big show tonight. What have you got coming up this evening?
Look, my great show. First of many, I hope. Do Labour want to indoctrinate kids by dragging them out of private schools and decolonising the curriculum in the state sector? Only someone who hates Britain would sign us up to the kind of deal that Keir Starmer wants to sign us up to with the Chagos Islands. The farmers are threatening to blockade supermarkets. Would people support them if they did? Ed Miliband, the true cost of his net zero lunacy has been revealed, £37 billion. And bang on 10:30, I reveal the full New Year's honours list. There's a surprise name on there. Spoiler alert, she doesn't like white van men.
Thanks, Patrick. That's all coming up after the weather. Now, I'll be back on New Year's Day right here on State of the Nation at 8 p.m. I'm Matt Goodwin. This has been State of the Nation. See you soon.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the New Year's period, it's likely to be unsettled, outbreaks of rain and some strong winds too, with multiple Met Office warnings already in force, so do keep an eye on those if you're travelling around for any festivities. But otherwise, this evening we've got a warm front moving into cold air, so not only bringing outbreaks of rain, but also some snow across parts of Scotland, mainly across hills, but we could also see some flurries to lower levels too. And these outbreaks of rain slowly edging their way into parts of Northern Ireland, through into the Scottish borders. It's going to be quite heavy and persistent at times, so a very wet morning to start New Year's Eve. Elsewhere, it's going to be largely dry, plenty of cloud around there and perhaps some drizzly spots across hilly areas. And for New Year's Eve itself, likely to be a very unsettled day, particularly across Scotland, where we are expecting those heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain, some quite blustery winds, particularly around exposed coasts too, and also snow, particularly across the north of Scotland and Shetland Island as well. And also a very wet start across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Once again, heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain at times, but elsewhere largely dry, though it is going to be a rather windy day on offer, particularly in northern areas under all that cloud and rain as it slowly edges its way towards the southeast, eventually clearing parts of Scotland, allowing some brighter spells to develop, but still very windy here and still plenty of blustery showers on offer by the afternoon. Once again, there's a chance these could be falling as snow at times too. Now, by the afternoon, outbreaks of rain generally across northern parts of Wales, northern parts of England, the driest of the weather likely across the far south and southeast. And then for New Year's Day itself, once again very unsettled. Further outbreaks of rain, this slowly once again edging its way towards central and southern parts of the UK. Largely dry to the north of this, though plenty of blustery showers moving through, once again falling as snow at times, and it is going to be feeling cold and remaining cold for the end of the week also. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs